Chapter 1, Section 9, Solving Equations by Multiplying and Dividing. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to solve equations using multiplication and division. If we look at this equation, 6x equals 48. To solve this, we would divide both sides of the equation by 6. 6 is the number that's being multiplied by the variable. So if I divide the left side by 6, I can do that as long as I divide the right side of the equation by 6. In the first example, we're going to solve negative 9 times y equals 45. So we want to isolate the variable y. We want to get y by itself. If you look on the left-hand side of the equation, y is not by itself. Y is being multiplied by a negative 9. So we want to undo the multiplication. The inverse operation of multiplication is division. So we would divide the left-hand side by a negative 9. We can do that as long as we divide the right-hand side by a negative 9. Now, these negative 9s, one's in the numerator, one's in the denominator. So those negative 9s will divide out. And on the left-hand side, we will be left with y. So we have successfully isolated the variable y. Now we need to simplify the right-hand side. 45 divided by negative 9. A positive divided by a negative, we know that our quotient will be negative. 45 divided by 9 is 5, so y equals negative 5. Now, if in the equation the variable is being divided by a number, we will use the inverse operation of division to simplify the left-hand side. So multiply both sides in this equation by a negative 4. Now let's take a look at the example. C divided by negative 3 equals 5. Again, we want to isolate the variable. We want the variable c to be all alone on the left-hand side. So on the left-hand side, c is not by itself. It is being divided by a negative 3. Now we can undo division by multiplication. So if the letter c is being divided by 3, I can do that by multiplying the left-hand side by negative 3. As long as I multiply the right-hand side by a negative 3. Now over here, I've got a negative 3, and that's going to be divided by a negative 3. So those will divide out. On the left-hand side, I will end up with just the letter c. I have successfully isolated the variable. Now we need to simplify the right-hand side. 5 times a negative 3. Now remember, in multiplication, if the signs are different, my product will be negative. So 5 times a negative 3, I will have a negative. 5 times 3 is 15. C equals negative 15. To solve an equation with multi-steps, we're going to work backward. So do PEMDAS backward. Remember the order of operations? PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, which stood for parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. But we want to solve an equation, and we want to isolate the variable. We can work the order of operations backward, or SAD-MEP. Subtraction, addition, undo those first, and then undo division, multiplication, exponents, and parentheses. So let's take the first example on the left. 4y plus 5 equals 29. We are trying to figure out what y equals. We want to isolate the variable y. So let's take a look on the left-hand side of this equation. What math is happening to the variable y? Y is being multiplied by 4, and 5 is being added to it. Now, we are trying to undo this. So we're going to use the order of operations backward, which means that I want to undo the addition first. How do we undo adding 5? Well, simply by subtracting 5. Now I can do that to the left-hand side of the equation as long as I subtract 5 to the right-hand side of the equation. Now we're going to simplify the left-hand side. Adding 5 and subtracting 5, that will cancel out. So on the left-hand side, I will be left with 4y. On the right-hand side, 29 minus 5 is 24. Now, we're not quite done yet. because we still want to isolate the variable y. Y is being multiplied by 4. To undo the multiplication, I'm going to use the inverse operation of division. So I'm going to divide the left-hand side by 4. I can do that as long as I divide the right-hand side of the equation by 4. The 4's will cancel out because one's in the numerator, one's in the denominator. They're dividing out. On the left-hand side, I have successfully isolated the variable y. Now we need to simplify the right-hand side. 24 divided by 4. So I'm going to come up with y equals 6. If I put that back in the equation, I would have 6 times 4 is 24. 24 plus 5 is 29. Our last example. X divided by negative 7 minus 1 equals 19. So I want to isolate the variable. So I'm going to look at the letter x and what math operations are happening on the left-hand side. Well, I see division, this fraction bar. I also see subtraction. Now, if we were following PEMDAS, we would divide before we subtracted. However, we're trying to undo. We're trying to isolate the variable, so we are going to do subtraction before division. So how would I undo subtracting 1? I'd simply add 1 to the left-hand side. I can do that as long as I add 1 to the right-hand side. These will cancel out. On the left-hand side, I will be left with x divided by negative 7. And on the right-hand side, 19 plus 1 equals 20. On the left-hand side is our variable. What math is happening to the variable x? It's being divided by negative 7. So the inverse operation of division, what will undo division? Multiply. So I'm going to multiply the left-hand side by a negative 7 as long as I multiply the right-hand side by a negative 7. These negative 7's, one in the numerator and one in the denominator, will cancel out. Now on the left-hand side, I have successfully isolated the variable, and we simplify the right-hand side. 20 times a negative 7. One of the factors is negative, and only one, so that means our product is going to be negative. So 7 times 20 is going to come out to be a negative 140. X equals negative 140.